The house sat quietly at the corner of Maple Street, its faded walls and cracked windows telling stories of years gone by. Once it had been filled with laughter, children running through the hallways, the aroma of home-cooked meals drifting from the kitchen. But now the house was just a hollow shell of what it used to be. The pictures on the walls were old, the frames covered in dust, and the once vibrant garden outside had grown wild and untended, much like the heart of the woman who lived there. Grandma Eleanor sat in a creaky old chair by the window, staring out at the busy world beyond. Her eyes, though tired and clouded with age, still held a glimmer of the warmth she had once shared with her family, but now those days were long gone. The death of her husband had stolen the spark from her life, and the loss of her children, years later, had left her heartbroken and isolated. She hadn't seen her family in over a decade. At 78, Eleanor felt the weight of her years bearing down on her with each passing day. Her body was frail, her mind sometimes wandering to memories she wished she could forget. And yet, here she was, alone in a world that had long since forgotten her. Her house, her only link to the past, was slowly falling apart, much like her spirit. She couldn't remember the last time she had had a conversation with someone, or when the last visitor had come to her door. The silence was oppressive, and the loneliness unbearable. Eleanor had once been the heart of her family. She had a vibrant spirit, an infectious laugh, and a deep love for those around her. But with each loss, she had withdrawn further into herself, like a flower closing its petals to shield itself from the cold. Her days were now spent in the quiet routine of simple tasks, baking bread, knitting, reading old books, but there was no joy in them. Her health had begun to deteriorate, the aches in her joints growing more frequent, and the weariness in her bones more pronounced. She often found herself waking up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this would be the night when she wouldn't wake up. Eleanor didn't mind the thought. She was tired, but something inside her still clung to the idea that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a purpose to all of this loneliness. Yet, as the years passed, even that faint hope began to fade, leaving her with nothing but the stillness of her empty home. Sam was a child of the streets, no more than 7 years old, but already bearing the weight of a life that had shown him nothing but hardship. His clothes were tattered, his face smeared with dirt from days spent running around the town without a roof over his head. His eyes, sharp and wary, always scanned his surroundings, alert to the dangers that lurked in every corner. He had learned the hard way that people rarely had kindness to offer, only judgment, rejection, or indifference. Sam had never known a real family. He was used to the hustle, scavenging food from trash cans, sneaking into stores to swipe what he could, and moving from one street corner to the next. He kept to himself, hiding his vulnerability behind a tough exterior. But deep down, beneath the layers of survival instincts, was a hunger for affection, for care, for something more than what he had known. On a particularly hot afternoon, when the sun blazed in the sky and the streets of the town felt like they were melting, Sam was wandering through the busy market square. His stomach growled, but he wasn't in the mood to beg for food. His eyes darted from one person to another, looking for an opportunity, a chance for something, a kind glance maybe, or a discarded snack. He was walking past a small park when he saw her. Grandma Eleanor had been sitting on a bench, but now she was on the ground. Her frail body sprawled across the pavement, completely still. A few people walked past, their eyes barely glancing at her, too absorbed in their own business to care. Sam's heart raced. His instincts told him to keep walking, to ignore her like everyone else. But something tugged at him, an impulse he couldn't explain. He ran toward her, his small hands reaching out to her. Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling but determined. His heart pounded in his chest as he checked her pulse. She was cold, her skin pale, but she was breathing, just barely. In that moment, the boy and the elderly woman shared something unspoken, an unbroken connection, formed in the midst of a busy world that had long since ignored both of them. As the days went by, Sam's visits to Grandma Eleanor became more frequent. At first, they were brief, awkward encounters. Sam would stop by on his way through the park, bringing a small bottle of water or whatever food he had managed to scrounge up. Grandma, though grateful, didn't speak much. She was still unsure of what this young boy wanted, what his intentions were, and why he had chosen to help her when no one else had. But over time, something shifted between them. One morning, as Sam was walking toward the park, he noticed Grandma sitting on her front porch. The sunlight streamed down, casting long shadows across the faded steps. She had her hands folded in her lap, staring out at the street. Sam hesitated for a moment before walking over to her, holding a sandwich he had found earlier that morning. "Hey, I thought you might be hungry," he said, holding it out. Grandma blinked up at him, surprised by his gesture. "Thank you, dear," she said quietly, her voice still tinged with weariness. She accepted the sandwich, though she only picked at it. Sam noticed how slowly she moved, how tired she seemed even in the warmth of the day. "You don't have to keep bringing me food," she added after a moment, glancing down at the sandwich, then back at Sam. "I'm fine." Sam shrugged, unsure of what to say. He didn't really know how to comfort people. He had never been good at it. But there was something about the way she spoke, so soft, so fragile, that made him want to do more. "Well, I don't mind," Sam said with a small, awkward smile. "It's no trouble." For the first time, Grandma really looked at him. Her gaze softened, and she gave a quiet nod. "All right, then," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe you can help me with something else." The next day, Sam came over, and this time, Grandma didn't wait for him to bring something. She asked him if he could help her pick up the scattered leaves in her yard. It wasn't a big job, just a small patch of grass that had been overtaken by dry leaves, but it was enough to give them something to do together. As Sam bent down, carefully raking the leaves into a pile, Grandma sat on the porch, watching him, her hands resting on her lap. After a while, she began to speak, her voice soft and distant, as if the words were floating in her mind before they could reach her lips. "You know," she began, "I used to have a big family, a husband, children. The house was always full of noise, full of life." She paused, her eyes drifting away as if she were looking into the past. "My husband, Thomas, was a good man, strong. We built this house together, and we filled it with love." Sam kept working, his mind focused on the task, but his ears were tuned to her words. It wasn't often that someone shared their life like this, especially with someone like him. "We had 2 children," Grandma continued, her voice thick with nostalgia. "A son, Jacob, and a daughter, Lily. They were the light of my life. Jacob was always running around, full of energy. Lily was quiet, like me, but she had the sweetest laugh." Her eyes filled with a quiet sadness, and Sam noticed the faint tremor in her hands as she clasped them together tightly. They're gone now," she said, her voice dropping, barely audible. "Jacob died in a car accident when he was 22. Lily, well, she was taken from me by cancer a few years later. And then Thomas, he just faded away after that. I was left with nothing but memories." The pain in her words was palpable, and Sam could feel the weight of her grief in the air around them. "I'm sorry," Sam said quietly, feeling uncomfortable. He wasn't good at this. He didn't know how to respond to someone's pain, but something inside him made him want to keep listening. For the next few weeks, the visits continued, and each time Sam found himself doing more for Grandma. He would help her clean the house, dusting the old furniture, sweeping the floors. Sometimes he brought her food. Other times he simply sat with her as she told him stories of the past, her childhood, her husband, the life they had shared. Slowly, Grandma began to open up more, sharing details of her life she hadn't spoken of in years. Sam found himself drawn to these stories. He had never known a real family, never had a home to go back to, never experienced the warmth of a dinner table surrounded by loved ones. The more he heard, the more he began to understand why Grandma held on to these memories. One evening, as Sam was washing dishes after dinner, Grandma spoke again. "You know, when I first lost my family, I thought it was the end of the world. I couldn't understand why I was left behind. Why was I the one who had to keep going when everything I loved was gone?" Sam paused, wiping his hands dry on the dish towel. "But after a while," she continued, "I realized that I wasn't really alone. Not in the way I thought. My memories of them, they're still with me, and that's enough for now." Sam looked up at her, seeing the quiet strength in her eyes, even through the grief that still lingered. "I don't know how you do it," he said softly. "You lost so much, but you're still here. You're still going." Grandma smiled faintly. "It's not easy, dear," she said, "but I've learned something in all these years. Even in the darkest times, there's always a way forward. You just have to take it, one step at a time." Sam didn't say anything at first, but he thought about her words as he walked home that evening. It was strange, this bond that was forming between them. It wasn't something he had expected, certainly not from someone like Grandma. He had always thought that people who were old, like her, had everything figured out. They had wisdom, stories, and were always strong. But Grandma wasn't that strong anymore. She was fragile, like a thread waiting to snap. And yet she was still standing. It made Sam think about his own life. His own struggles, his own loneliness. He never let anyone get too close. He had learned long ago that people would always let you down, so it was better to keep your distance. But with Grandma, it was different. Every time he visited her, he found himself opening up more, little by little, even though he didn't want to. He found himself sharing pieces of his past, his mom who had abandoned him, his dad who had never been there. He spoke about the streets, about how he had learned to survive without anyone caring. And Grandma listened. She didn't judge. She just listened, offering quiet words of comfort when he needed them most. The bond between Sam and Grandma deepened over time. What started as small acts of kindness, a glass of water here, a few tidbits of food there, grew into something far more meaningful. They weren't just helping each other anymore. They were healing each other. Their shared loneliness became the center of their connection, and in that space, a real, heartfelt trust began to grow. Sam's rough exterior started to soften in the presence of Grandma's gentle wisdom, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had a place, a person to care about, and who cared about him in return. The bond that started with an act of kindness had become so much more. It was now a foundation built on trust, care, and the simple but powerful human need for connection. And in each other, they had finally found what they both needed most, a home. The attic was a dusty, forgotten place. It smelled of old paper, leather, and the faint scent of wood that had weathered over decades. Boxes filled with forgotten memories lined the walls, old furniture draped in sheets, stacks of books yellowed with age, and a variety of knickknacks that once held meaning, but were now buried in the layers of time. Sam had never been up there before. He had seen Grandma's reluctance to touch the attic, and she never spoke of it. But one afternoon, as he came to help with the cleaning, he noticed her staring at the staircase leading up to the attic door. "Do you want me to go up there?" Sam asked, his voice tentative. He had noticed the way her gaze lingered on the attic door, like she wanted to escape into the past but couldn't quite bring herself to do it. Grandma hesitated. Her lips pressed together in thought. "I suppose it's time," she said softly, her voice laced with both sorrow and acceptance. "There's nothing up there but memories. I guess it's time to face them." Sam felt a strange knot in his stomach, but he nodded. He wasn't sure what he was expecting to find, but curiosity pushed him onward. The stairs creaked beneath his feet as he climbed, his mind swirling with questions. The attic felt like a relic of another time, a space suspended in memory, and Sam couldn't help but wonder what secrets it held. When he reached the top, Sam pushed open the door, and the musty air hit him instantly. Dust particles floated in the beams of sunlight that seeped through the small attic window. He stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, and began to sift through the old boxes. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just moving things around out of habit, trying to make sense of the clutter. Then, buried underneath a stack of old blankets, he found it. A framed photo, a little worn at the edges but still clear enough to recognize the faces within. Sam's fingers brushed off the dust, and as he gazed down at the photograph, something inside him shifted. The photo was of a man, middle-aged, with dark, kind eyes and a smile that hinted at a quiet strength. Sam's heart skipped. He didn't know why, but the man in the picture looked eerily familiar. His features were strikingly similar to Sam's own. Sam turned the photo over, hoping to find some explanation, some hint of who this person was, but the back was blank. No name, no date, just the faded imprint of a once sticky label. He stood there for a moment, the photo held loosely in his hand, as the question echoed in his mind. Who was this man? Grandma's footsteps creaked softly behind him, and Sam turned to find her standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Is that?" she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Is that Thomas?" Sam's heart thudded in his chest. "Who's Thomas?" Grandma stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the photo as if it had pulled her back in time. For a long moment there was only silence between them. Then with a shaky breath she whispered, "That's my brother." Sam's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the revelation. "Your brother?" Grandma nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the photo. "His name was Thomas. He was my younger brother. We were very close when we were young, but he left when I was a teenager. He disappeared after a terrible tragedy, one that, well, it shattered our family. I never saw him again. I thought I'd lost him for good." Her voice wavered, and she reached for the photo, her hands trembling as she took it from Sam's grasp. She looked at it longingly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and longing. "That was the last picture I ever had of him," she whispered. "That was taken just before he left. I never knew what happened to him after that." Sam's mind was spinning, the weight of her words sinking in. "And what does this have to do with me?" Grandma's gaze snapped back to him, her eyes wide with realization. She stared at him for a long moment, as if seeing him for the first time. Her voice, barely above a whisper, trembled as she spoke. "Sam, my brother Thomas. He had a son. You're my nephew." The words hung in the air between them, thick with the gravity of what they meant. Sam froze, his heart thudding in his chest. A million thoughts rushed through his mind, but all he could focus on was the word nephew. His brain couldn't quite process it. He had no family. He had never known his family. He had never known what it felt like to belong anywhere. The idea that he might actually have a family, that he might actually be connected to someone who wasn't a stranger, was too overwhelming to grasp. "Are you?" "Sure," Sam asked, his voice hoarse. He couldn't believe it. He wasn't sure if he was ready to believe it. Grandma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm sure, Sam, I'm sure. You look just like him. Just like your father." Sam stood there, his hands shaking as he processed the information. 1,000 emotions crashed over him. Shock, disbelief, confusion, and something else that he couldn't quite place. He had never imagined this, never even dared to hope for it. Grandma, seeing the storm of emotions on his face, stepped closer and gently placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, comforting, and for the first time in a long while, Sam felt something close to hope. "I know it's a lot to take in," she said softly. "But you're family, Sam. You're mine. And I've been waiting so long to find you." Sam swallowed hard, his throat tight. I didn't know. I didn't know you existed." "I didn't either," she replied with a sad smile. "But now that you're here, I don't plan on losing you again." The room felt smaller now, the weight of the revelation pressing down on both of them. Sam didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Instead, he simply nodded, his heart full of emotions he couldn't fully comprehend. He had never known what family felt like. He had never known what it was like to have someone who cared for him, who loved him without asking for anything in return. But now he had Grandma. The emotional weight of the moment settled between them like a blanket. Neither of them knew exactly where to go from here, but somehow, they knew they didn't have to figure it out alone. For the first time in his life, Sam felt the beginnings of something he had only heard about in stories. A real connection, a bond that ran deeper than blood, one forged in the quiet space of their shared loneliness. Sam, feeling his chest tighten with a mix of emotions, looked at Grandma. And for the first time, he allowed himself to hope. The days after Sam's discovery were filled with a strange, heavy silence. Grandma Eleanor had shared the news with a sense of relief, but the truth was sinking in slowly for both of them. For Sam, it felt like a dream, one where he didn't have to run anymore, where he had a family that might actually care. For Grandma, it was a new beginning, but it came with its own set of challenges, ones she hadn't faced in years. One evening after dinner, Grandma quietly handed Sam a letter. It was from the bank. "Is everything all right?" Sam asked, noticing the way her hands trembled as she passed him the paper. Grandma shook her head. "I've been trying to keep up, but it's all catching up to me now." Sam opened the letter, scanning the bold text. "Final notice, repossession of property." His stomach dropped. "Grandma," he started, but the words stuck in his throat. They can't take the house, can they?" "They can," she said quietly. "The debts piled up after your Uncle Thomas died. I couldn't keep up with the payments after losing him. And when your cousins passed, I didn't care about anything except surviving. I couldn't bear to face it. But now, it's too late." Her voice cracked as she finished, and Sam felt the weight of it in his chest. The house, the only link she had to her past, to her lost family, was slipping through her fingers. Determined not to lose everything, Grandma made up her mind. The following morning, Sam found her in the attic, sorting through old boxes. Some of the boxes contained family heirlooms, keepsakes from her husband and children, things that had once meant everything to her. She pulled out a box of old china, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. "I'll have to sell it," she said, her voice tight. "This was my mother's, but I'll have to let it go. If it helps keep the house—" She trailed off, not finishing the thought. Sam stood frozen in the doorway, watching her carefully unwrap the delicate pieces, each one more beautiful than the last. He knew this wasn't just about money for Grandma, it was about memories. Her family, her life. He felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. "Grandma, we don't have to sell these. We can figure something out. We'll find a way." She looked up at him, eyes filled with tears. "What else can I do, Sam? I'm too old to work. I've been holding on to things that are only worth something to me, but they don't mean anything to anyone else." The quiet resignation in her voice broke Sam's heart. That evening, Sam couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of how he could help. He had no money, nothing but the small savings he had tucked away from odd jobs and a few coins he had scavenged. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The next morning, Sam made up his mind. He would go around the neighborhood and ask for help. It wasn't easy. He had never trusted people enough to ask for anything. But this was different. This was for Grandma. He started with the old woman who lived across the street, Mrs. Jenkins. She was a kind woman who had always waved when Sam passed by, though they had never spoken much. Sam knocked on her door, his heart pounding in his chest. When she opened the door, he fumbled for the right words. Hi, Mrs. Jenkins. I need help." She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Help with what, Sam?" My grandma. She's going to lose the house. The bank's taking it. I was wondering if you could help. Just a little. Anything would help." Mrs. Jenkins stared at him for a moment, then sighed. "Sam, I've been hearing about that. You should have told me sooner. You've been helping your grandma all this time, haven't you?" Sam nodded, feeling the weight of his own words. "She doesn't deserve this. She's been through so much. I don't want her to lose everything. She's the only family I've got now." Mrs. Jenkins studied him for a moment, her eyes softening. "Let me see what I can do. I don't have much, but I can give you something." Over the next few days, Sam visited several neighbors, some who he barely knew, others who had seen him running errands for Grandma. He was met with kindness, but also with uncertainty. Most of them were elderly themselves, living on tight budgets and struggling to get by. "Sam, I'm sorry. I wish I could help," said Mr. Hayes, the old fruit vendor. "But money's tight for all of us. I can't give you much. But here." He pressed a few crumpled bills into Sam's hand. "I'll take it," Sam said quietly, stuffing the money into his pocket. He could feel the tension mounting in his chest. How much longer could they go on like this? He was running out of time. Sam's desperation grew. He couldn't just stand by while Grandma was losing everything. That evening, as he was walking home, he passed a few of the local stores. He noticed a sign for help wanted, a part-time job cleaning at a nearby diner. It wasn't much, but it was something. He rushed home, determined to talk to Grandma. "I got a job," Sam said, trying to hide the excitement in his voice. Grandma looked at him, puzzled. "A job? But Sam, you're just a boy. You should be in school." "I'm done with school," Sam said, his voice hardening. "I've been done for a long time." He didn't want to explain that his days were spent surviving on the streets, hustling for food and shelter. He didn't want Grandma to worry about that. He just wanted to do something, anything to help her. But Grandma shook her head slowly. "Sam, you don't need to do this. You're already helping me so much. Don't wear yourself out." "I have to, Grandma," Sam replied firmly. "I won't let you lose the house. I'll work as much as I can. You don't have to sell everything." Despite his determination, Sam began to feel the weight of the situation. His small savings weren't enough to cover the debt. The neighbors' help, though appreciated, wasn't enough either. The constant stress of trying to keep everything together was starting to wear on him. And every time he saw Grandma, sitting silently in her chair, lost in her thoughts, he couldn't help but feel that they were losing the battle. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. "I won't let her down," Sam thought, clenching his fists. "I won't let her lose everything." The tension between them was palpable now. Both of them were struggling silently, each trying to keep the other from knowing the full extent of their fears. Sam's pride wouldn't let him admit how difficult things were. Grandma, on the other hand, tried to pretend everything was fine, but the lines on her face deepened each day. The financial ruin was closing in, but Sam had made a promise, and he intended to keep it, whatever the cost. The days stretched on with no real change. Sam's determination to keep things together only grew stronger, but he was beginning to feel the toll. The small savings he had managed to scrape together weren't enough, and Grandma's health was deteriorating from the stress of it all. She barely ate, her hands shaking more than usual as she went about her daily tasks. She refused to let Sam see how much this was weighing on her, but it was clear that she was struggling, just as he was. Then one evening, as Sam returned home from his second shift at the diner, he noticed something unusual. A crowd gathered in front of Grandma's house. A few of the neighbors were standing by the porch, talking in hushed voices. His heart raced as he approached, uncertain of what was going on. "Sam, over here!" Mr. Hayes called out, waving him over with a smile. Sam stepped up to the porch, his brow furrowed. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to keep the edge out of his voice. "We're organizing a fundraiser for you and your grandma," Mrs. Jenkins, the old woman from across the street, explained, her eyes warm with compassion. "We've seen how much you've been helping her, and we want to help too." Sam was stunned. The realization that the people around him, people he had always seen from a distance, had noticed his efforts left him speechless. "You don't have to do that," Sam said quickly, his voice tight. "I don't want to—" "Sam, don't be stubborn," Mr. Hayes interrupted gently. "When we see someone in need, we help. You've been looking after that sweet old lady, and we all know what she's been going through." "But Sam hesitated, unsure of what to say. He had never felt so out of place. "Let us help, son," Mrs. Jenkins said, patting him on the back. "You've given us no reason not to. We care about you both." The fundraiser was set for the following weekend, but word had already spread throughout the neighborhood. The old community center, once a bustling place for town dances and local events, was now the center of their efforts. Sam could hardly believe how many people were willing to pitch in. Mrs. Jenkins had baked pies, Mr. Hayes had donated crates of apples, and even the local seamstress had offered her services to mend old clothes for donations. Sam spent the next few days running errands, helping decorate the community center, carrying boxes, making calls. His heart wasn't as heavy anymore. Each day brought new surprises. Small donations, kind gestures, people who knew Grandma or had heard about her, stepping forward to help. On the day of the fundraiser, the community center was transformed. Long tables lined the walls, piled with homemade goods, pies, cakes, bread, and jars of jam. The local band had volunteered to play music, and families filled the space, talking, laughing, and donating what they could. The town, once so indifferent to Sam and his struggles, had come alive with a sense of unity. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about people coming together in a way that Sam had never experienced before. Sam watched as people came up to him, handing him envelopes filled with cash, shaking his hand, or simply offering a kind word. He was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. In a way, he felt like a stranger to it all. He had spent most of his life fighting for survival alone, but now, for the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger. Grandma, though still frail and weak, was there too, sitting at a table near the back, surrounded by well-wishers. Her face lit up with a quiet joy, something Sam hadn't seen in a long time. People who had once been mere acquaintances were now helping her in ways she never imagined. It made her feel seen again. It made her feel like she mattered. "You've done it, Sam," Grandma whispered to him, her voice choked with emotion. "You've shown me that people still care." As the evening wore on, the last of the donations were counted. The small crowd had thinned, and the sounds of the music faded into the night. Sam, exhausted from the day's events, walked over to the table where the final tally was being made. Mrs. Jenkins stood there with the money, a wide smile on her face. "We did it, Sam," she said, holding up the envelope. "You've raised enough to pay off a portion of the debt, and the bank's giving you some time to catch up." Sam's heart soared as he heard the words. It wasn't the full amount, but it was enough to buy them time. Time to figure out what to do next. Time for Grandma to rest. Time for Sam to find another way to keep fighting. "We're not out of the woods yet," Sam said, his voice filled with quiet relief. "But we've got a chance now." Mrs. Jenkins nodded. "That's all we can ask for." The next day, the weight of the fundraiser lifted from Sam's shoulders, but the reality of their situation still loomed. While they had bought time, the debt was far from gone. The foreclosure was only delayed. Sam still had to work harder, find more solutions, and keep the momentum going. But something had shifted. He wasn't alone anymore. The community was with him. The neighborhood support was the beginning of a new chapter for Sam and Grandma. The bond between them, once built on shared loneliness and hardship, had evolved into something much stronger. It was a reminder that no matter how difficult the journey, no one had to face it alone. When there is love and a shared sense of responsibility, even the toughest obstacles could be overcome. As Sam watched Grandma that night, a smile on her face as she spoke with the neighbors, he realized something. This wasn't just about saving the house. It was about creating a family, and with each passing day, that family was growing. In the coming weeks, though the financial struggles weren't over, the relief was palpable. Sam knew that with the support of the community, he and Grandma had a fighting chance. The road ahead was uncertain, but they had each other, and that, he realized, was all they really needed. The fundraiser had given them much more than just money. It had given them hope, and in the end, that was all they truly needed. The days following the fundraiser were filled with a bittersweet sense of relief. The money raised had provided Grandma and Sam with a brief respite from the bank's looming threat. It wasn't much, but it was something, a temporary pause in the storm. The community's support had breathed life back into their fight, but as the days went by, it became clear that it wouldn't be enough. The debt was still too much to overcome. The bank's demands continued, growing heavier with each passing week. Grandma and Sam spent hours sorting through bills, trying to make sense of their situation. The weight of it all was starting to take a toll on Grandma's health. She spent more time sitting by the window, staring out at the overgrown yard that had once been her pride. Her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes far away. One evening, after Sam returned from his shift at the diner, he found Grandma sitting at the kitchen table, an envelope open in front of her. Her face was pale, the usual spark gone from her eyes. She didn't even look up when he entered the room. "Grandma?" Sam's voice was soft, uncertain. "What's wrong?" Grandma didn't answer immediately. She just stared at the paper in front of her, her fingers tracing the edges of the letter. After a long silence, she finally spoke, her voice trembling with a mix of resignation and sorrow. "They're going to take it all, Sam," she whispered, her words barely audible. "The house, it's not enough anymore. The debt is too great. Even with everything we've tried, it's not enough to save this place." Sam stood frozen in the doorway, the blood draining from his face. "No," he said, his voice rising in disbelief. "There has to be another way. We can keep fighting." Grandma slowly lifted her gaze, her eyes full of pain. She had always been strong, always the one to keep going even when things seemed impossible. But now Sam could see the defeat in her eyes. The fight was draining from her, and she knew it was time to make the hardest decision of her life. "I can't keep holding on, Sam," she said quietly. "Not when it means losing you too. I've spent my life holding on to this house, this memory of my family. But it's only hurting you now. You've been through too much, and I won't let you suffer for my past." Sam felt the weight of her words crush him. It wasn't just the house she was letting go of. It was the memories, the last piece of her family, the only thing that had kept her going after everything she had lost. This house was more than just walls and a roof. It was her history. It was the last thread tying her to a life she had once cherished. "Grandma, no," Sam whispered, his voice breaking. "This is our home. We fought for it. We can keep fighting." "I've been fighting for so long, Sam," Grandma said, her voice full of weariness. "But it's not just the house, it's me. I'm tired, Sam. Tired of fighting. I want you to have a future. I want you to be free of this burden. I've already lost so much, but I won't lose you too." The days that followed were filled with quiet conversations, tears, and heartache. Sam couldn't sleep at night, his mind racing with the reality of what was happening. The idea of losing the house, the only home he had ever known, seemed impossible. He had come to love this place, the quiet moments with Grandma, the peace of their small world. But now, even that was slipping away. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table, Grandma reached over and placed her hand on his. Her fingers were cold, frail, but the warmth in her touch reminded him that she was still there, still fighting for him in her own way. "Sam," she said softly, "I need you to understand that this is for you. I'm not doing this because I want to give up. I'm doing it because I love you. I want you to have the life you deserve. A life where you don't have to worry about bills and debts and losing everything." Sam looked down at her hand, his heart breaking. He had never felt so torn. He wanted to fight for her, for this house, but he also knew that she was right. They couldn't keep living like this. She had already given up so much, her family, her past. And now she was sacrificing the one thing that kept her connected to them. "I don't want to lose you." "Grandma," Sam said quietly, his voice shaking, "I don't want to lose the only family I have." "You won't lose me, Sam," she said, squeezing his hand gently. "But you have to live. You have to have your own life. This house, these walls, they're just things. What matters is that we have each other, and we always will." The decision was made. The next morning, Grandma called the real estate agent. She spoke with a calm resolve, her voice steady as she arranged for the sale of the house. Sam stayed in the kitchen, unable to listen to the conversation, unable to face the finality of it all. When Grandma hung up the phone, she didn't say anything for a long time. She simply sat down at the table, her eyes clouded with sorrow. "Grandma," Sam said quietly, his voice low, "we can start over. We'll find a place. We'll make it work." Grandma nodded, though she didn't meet his gaze. "We will, but it's not just the house. It's letting go of the past, letting go of what we can't change, and starting fresh." Sam felt the tears sting his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. He had to be strong for her, for both of them. The days that followed were filled with a quiet sadness. Sam packed up their belongings, carefully wrapping each item with a sense of reverence, as though the very act of moving on would somehow dishonor the memories they had made in this place. Grandma, too, seemed lost in her own thoughts. She no longer spoke of the past, only of what was to come. She had accepted the reality that this house, their home, was no longer theirs to keep. The sale went through quickly, and before they knew it, the house was gone. The papers were signed, the keys handed over. The house that had once been filled with laughter and life was now a distant memory, a chapter of their lives closed. But in that quiet moment, as Sam and Grandma stood outside the empty house, Sam realized something important. They had each other. They were more than the house, more than the past they were letting go of. What mattered now was the future they would build together, wherever that might be. "Let's go home," Grandma said softly, her voice full of resolve. "Wherever that is." Sam nodded, his heart swelling with a love he couldn't quite put into words. He didn't know what the future held, but as long as they had each other, he knew they could face anything. And that, he realized, was all that mattered. As the final days in the house passed, the rooms grew emptier. Sam and Grandma had packed their belongings, slowly, carefully, as though the very act of moving would erase the history they had made in these walls. The last remaining bits of furniture sat covered with sheets, and the once vibrant garden in the backyard had been overrun with weeds, a silent reminder of the time they had spent here. Grandma moved through the house with quiet purpose, folding up old blankets, wrapping picture frames, and placing them into boxes. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. The house had lost its meaning, but the memories remained, lingering like a shadow in the corners of each room. Sam stood in the attic, the last place they hadn't fully gone through yet. He had always avoided it before, afraid of what memories it might hold. But now there was nothing left to hide from. He began sorting through the last of the boxes, and as he lifted an old trunk from the corner, something caught his eye. A letter, yellowed with age and sealed with a ribbon. The envelope was marked with the familiar handwriting of Grandma's late husband, Thomas. Sam's heart skipped a beat. He had heard so many stories about Thomas, about how kind and loving he had been. But he had never seen his handwriting, never read anything that had come from him directly. Without thinking, Sam opened the letter. It was short but powerful, written in a neat, flowing hand as though it were meant to be preserved forever. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then our time has passed. I don't want to leave you with sadness, only with this, our love and our promise that we will always be together. You may wonder as you go through the years ahead if I was ever really here, if my love ever truly reached you. Let me tell you this. It did. And more importantly, Eleanor, I want you to know that even in my absence, you will not be alone. You will never be alone because our son, his children, your family, will always be part of you. Even if we are apart, we are never gone. The family we have made together will continue to guide you, protect you, and love you through every dark hour. Trust in that. And when the time comes, you will know. Family is what keeps us alive, no matter the distance. Yours forever. Thomas Sam read the letter slowly, his fingers tracing the faded ink. His heart raced as the truth settled in. His family, his real family, had always been here. He had known it in some way deep down, but this letter was a confirmation, a final sign that he belonged here. This was not just a place where he had ended up. It was where he had always been meant to be. He slowly turned to face Grandma, who had silently entered the attic behind him. She stood in the doorway, watching him with quiet understanding. "Grandma," Sam said, his voice shaking slightly as he held out the letter. This says everything. It says that I was always meant to be here, that I'm part of this family." Grandma's eyes filled with tears as she stepped forward, taking the letter from Sam's hands. She read it in silence, her lips trembling as the weight of her late husband's words sank in. "I always knew," she whispered, more to herself than to Sam. "I always knew you were meant to be here." Sam felt the knot in his chest loosen, a strange mix of relief and sorrow washing over him. He had always felt like an outsider, never truly belonging. But now, with this letter, everything made sense. He had family, not just by blood, but by the promise Thomas had made long ago. Grandma turned toward him, her face soft with tears. She reached out, pulling him into her arms. Sam, taken aback at first, hesitated before allowing himself to relax in her embrace. It was the first time in his life he had ever felt like he truly had a place to belong. "I'm your family now," Sam whispered into her ear, his voice thick with emotion. Grandma's tears flowed freely now, but she smiled as she held him close, as though this moment, this beautiful, painful moment, was the culmination of everything they had been through, everything they had fought for. "You always were, Sam," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You always were." The two of them stood there, holding each other in the quiet attic, the house around them now a place of memories instead of burdens. It had been hard to let go, but in that moment, they understood that it was time to move forward, together. They had each other, and that was all they needed. The house, the past, the pain, they could leave that behind now. What mattered was the future they would build from this point on, united as a family. For Sam, the words of the letter felt like a lifeline. He had always thought that family was just a concept, a word that people threw around without meaning, but now he knew better. Family was a bond, something deeper than blood, forged through love, sacrifice, and connection. As they walked down the stairs together, ready to leave the house that had been their home for so long, Sam felt a sense of peace he had never known before. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And for the first time in his life, Sam felt whole. The sun was setting as Sam and Grandma Eleanor stood outside their new home. It was smaller than the house they had left behind, humbler in its simplicity, but there was something peaceful about it. A quiet kind of peace that only came from knowing they were finally free from the heavy weight of the past. The house, a modest one-story cottage at the edge of town, sat on a quiet street lined with tall trees. The small front yard was filled with grass that needed cutting, but there was a bench under the old oak tree where they could sit together. The garden, though unkempt, had potential, a place where Sam and Grandma could plant new memories, different from the ones they had left behind. Grandma stood at the front door, looking up at the sky as the last of the daylight faded. The faintest smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She had her arm wrapped around Sam's, leaning into him for support, though there was something in her step that was steadier than before. Sam glanced at her, seeing the peace in her eyes, the quiet acceptance that had settled over her. She was no longer the frail woman she had been in the house on Maple Street. There was a calm in her that told him she had finally let go of the past and was ready for this new chapter. "Do you like it, Grandma?" Sam asked softly. "I do," she said, her voice warm, but faint with emotion. "It's not much, but it's ours, and that's enough." The first few weeks in the new house were filled with simple routines. Sam would wake up early and go out to the garden, starting to clean up the overgrown weeds, pulling up the stubborn vines, and planting new flowers. He worked with care, trying to make the space a place where Grandma could rest and feel comfortable. Grandma, despite her weakened health, found ways to help. She'd sit by the window, watching him work, or she'd sift through the old family albums, sorting through photos of people she once loved. But her mind was always on Sam. She spent hours talking to him, sharing the stories of her life, and giving him bits of advice. Even though her health remained fragile, the burden of worry that had plagued her before had lifted. The fear of losing Sam, of being alone, had faded into the past. With him by her side, she could face whatever came next. Sam, for his part, found peace in the small things. The neighborhood began to feel like a second family. People stopped by, offering help, bringing food, or simply chatting for a while. He didn't expect it, but each visit made him feel more connected to this community. People who were willing to offer a little kindness, without expecting anything in return. He took on small jobs around the neighborhood, helping Mr. Hayes at the fruit stand, doing yard work for Mrs. Jenkins, and even offering to run errands for other neighbors. Though the work was simple, it brought him a sense of purpose. Each task he completed made him feel like he was contributing to something bigger than himself. And with each day that passed, he learned something new. Not just about work, but about the value of community. It was more than just a place where people lived. It was a place where people cared for one another. It was about being there for each other, no matter the circumstances. One evening, as Sam sat beside Grandma on the porch, the two of them watching the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He wasn't alone anymore. He had found his place in this world, not in the house they had left behind, but in the life they were building together. Grandma looked at him, her tired eyes filled with warmth. "You've done well, Sam," she said, her voice soft and proud. "I can rest now. You've given me everything I could have asked for." Sam smiled at her, squeezing her hand gently. "No, Grandma, you gave me everything. I never had anyone before, but now I do. And that's all that matters." She nodded slowly, looking out at the stars. "I think you're right," she said quietly. "Home isn't just a place. It's about the people who are in it, and the love that fills it. Sam leaned back, resting his head against the chair, feeling the weight of her words settle into his chest. He had spent so many years thinking that home was something that could be bought, something defined by walls and belongings. But now he understood. Home was the place where love was shared, where sacrifice was made, and where bonds were created. As the days passed, Sam continued working hard, finding a rhythm in his new life. He didn't have much, but it was enough. Grandma, despite her fragile health, found moments of joy in their simple life. Together, they created a space filled with warmth, laughter, and love. It was a small house, yes, but it was their home, and it was filled with everything they needed, each other. The neighbors, too, became part of their family. They brought over pies, vegetables from their gardens, and shared stories of their own lives. Sam had never known anything like it before. The way people would look out for one another, offering help without hesitation. It wasn't just the support they had received. It was the connection they had found. For the first time in his life, Sam understood the true meaning of family, not just as a word, but as something you build, something you fight for. One afternoon, as Sam sat on the front steps, watching the sun set behind the mountains, Grandma came to join him. She sat beside him, her frail body leaning into his side for support. She didn't need to say anything. Just being with him was enough. "I'm glad we're here, Sam," she said softly, her voice filled with contentment. "I feel at peace." Sam smiled, the warmth of her words filling him. "Me too, Grandma. Me too." And as they sat together, watching the sky change colors, Sam realized something important. That even in the midst of hardship, they had found their way to something beautiful. The future was uncertain, but with Grandma by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. The true meaning of home, Sam had come to realize, was not in the walls that sheltered them, but in the hearts that filled them. It was in the love they had for one another, the sacrifices they had made, and the community that had embraced them. As long as they had each other, nothing else mattered. And with that thought in his heart, Sam knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together they had already found the most important thing of all, a family.